A Salt Lake City man has been sentenced to 3 life sentences without parole. Back in 2015, 42-year-old Alexander Hung Tran was arrested for the deaths of 28-year-old Dakota Smith, 63-year-old Heike Poike, and her 2-month-old grandchild after he was found in Salt Lake City with their bodies and a gun. Court documents say Tran had become fixated on Poike's daughter, sending increasingly obsessive text messages. A jury found him guilty for 3 counts of aggravated murder at the end of August, nearly 10 years after charges were filed.
Ultimately, 10 years later, we were able to bring this person in a triple homicide to justice. And although it'll be an incomplete justice, because the real perfect justice would be that these crimes never happened.
In addition to his sentence, court documents show Tran has also been ordered to pay more than...
The screen fades in on a quiet, unassuming home in Salt Lake City, the kind of place where neighbors wave, kids laugh in the yard, and families go about their days thinking they're safe. But inside that house lived a darkness nobody saw coming. Tonight, we tell the story of Heike Poike, a grandmother full of love and warmth, visiting to help care for her daughter and grandchildren. There was also a baby in her arms, just 2 months old, little Lyrik Poike, a newborn whose smile lit up any room. And a family friend, Dakota Smith, kind, caring, someone always ready to help. None of them expected that a place meant to shelter them would become a tomb. Because lurking in the shadows of that home was a man who had once promised safety. Alexander Hung Tran, the landlord who offered this family a roof, who convinced them to stay when they had nowhere else to go. Over time, investigators say, his help twisted into obsession. What began as a kind gesture to a struggling mother turned into something dark and dangerous. He proposed marriage to the tenant's daughter, promising a future. She said yes, but only because she felt she had no other option, the roof over her children's heads. Behind closed doors, tension was growing. Unspoken threats, emotional pressure, a building sense of fear. Others may have seen a quiet house, but inside, a tragic story was unfolding. One fueled by control, desperation, and a deadly obsession. Then came the day when everything changed. On September 18, 2015, a morning like any other, Heike was expected to pick up her grandson from school. But she never showed up. Instead, police arrived at the home and found a horror no one was ready for. Heike was dead. Lyrik was gone. And Dakota, the family friend, lay lifeless too. 3 lives brutally erased in a home that should have meant safety. And the man who once gave them shelter? He was nowhere to be found. Later found hiding in the basement of that same house. What followed was a long investigation, a trial, and finally, justice. On November 7, 2025, Alexander Hung Tran was sentenced to 3 life terms without possibility of parole. A sentence meant to honor the memory of Heike, Lyrik, and Dakota. A sentence meant to signal that obsession, when left unchecked, can turn protection into deadly violence. In this video, we peel back the walls of that home. We retrace what led to this disaster, from the landlord's first kind gesture to his final monstrous act. We honor the memories of Heike, Lyrik, and Dakota. And we ask a question. How often do we ignore the warning signs when trust feels like our only option? Stay with me because this is a story you need to hear. A story not about horror for shock value, but about real people, real pain, and a warning we all should take seriously. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel, like, comment, and share. The screen opens on a quiet street in Salt Lake City. Modest houses lined up, a calm morning light filtering through trees, children playing in yards. It could be any neighborhood. It could be your neighborhood. But behind one of those doors lies a story so tragic, so senseless, it will haunt you long after the credits roll. Inside a house at 639 N. Sir Philip Drive lived a small family, a grandmother, her daughter, 2 children, and a caring friend. The grandmother, Heike Poike, had recently moved in to help her daughter with childcare. Her granddaughter, a 2-month-old infant named Lyrik Poike, was a tiny, delicate new life, a baby whose arrival brought hope and love to a family trying to get by. And in the home often was a friend, Dakota Smith, kind, warm, someone willing to help, someone who was part of this family's world. They lived upstairs. Meanwhile, the downstairs, the basement of the same house, was occupied by the landlord, Alexander Hung Tran, a man whose home his mother owned. According to court records, the Poike family had moved in around early August 2015. Tran's mother owned the property and allowed the family, Heike, her daughter, and 2 children, to stay there. At first, it seemed like a chance at stability. A roof over their heads, a place to rest, the grandmother's support, the warmth of family. Many might have thought that was all they needed. Safety, shelter, a second chance. But behind the appearance of generosity lay a dangerous seed quietly taking root. Because soon after the family moved in, Tran reportedly saw the daughter, known in reports only as AP, for the first time. It didn't take long. According to prosecutors opening in the trial, he became infatuated after sending her a message saying, "God, you're beautiful." From that moment, what may have seemed harmless admiration spiraled into obsession. He bombarded her with texts, professed love, declared he wanted to marry her, even proposed they have a child together. For AP, the situation was complicated. She and her children were living there because they needed help. They had been offered a place to stay through a mutual agreement. When he proposed marriage, she felt pressured, not by affection but by obligation. The shelter he provided for her family made it hard to refuse. Meanwhile, Tran's own family was uneasy. His mother, the actual homeowner, was reportedly displeased with the arrangement. She saw the increasing bills, the strain, and told her son she planned to evict the tenants. That decision, perhaps meant to solve a financial problem, instead triggered something far more dangerous. Thus, tension built beneath the roof. On one side, a grandmother trying to support her daughter and grandchildren, a newborn baby born into hope, a friend who cared and helped. On the other, a landlord growing increasingly fixated, resentment swelling in the background, a home guilt by threats of eviction and financial stress. What looked like a fresh start for a struggling family, a chance at stability, was turning into a powder keg. A place meant for safety was becoming a trap. And as the days passed toward September 2015, no one outside suspected just how dark things would become. Because sometimes the greatest danger doesn't announce itself with thunder. It creeps in slowly, quietly, under the guise of help, under the name of kindness. Let us peel back the thin walls of that house and trace how obsession turned into horror, how a landlord became a killer. Stay with me. The morning of September 18, 2015 began like any other in the neighborhood. The sun rose quietly over Salt Lake City, casting soft light over lawns and rooftops. Children prepared for school, commuters hurried toward work, and life moved in its predictable rhythm. But inside the home on Sir Philip Drive, something was terribly wrong. Heike Poike was supposed to pick up her grandson from school that day. She never missed a pickup. She was the dependable one, the grandmother who held the family together, who brought order to chaos, who stepped in whenever her daughter needed help. Her absence was the first crack in a day that was about to collapse. When she didn't show up, concern quickly grew. Calls went unanswered. Messages weren't returned. A quiet, creeping unease settled over those who knew her. Something wasn't right. And soon the authorities were contacted. Police arrived at the home for a welfare check, not knowing they were about to walk into a tragedy that would shake the entire community. Inside, officers found a scene that words struggled to convey. 3 lives were gone: Heike Poike, the grandmother who had come to help her family; Lyrik Poike, the 2-month-old baby whose future had barely begun; Dakota Smith, the gentle family friend who often stepped in to assist. All taken in a moment of brutal violence. But one thing immediately stood out: the landlord was missing. Not just missing, gone. No sign of him anywhere in the home. No response. Not a word to police or neighbors. A quiet basement that should have been occupied by him was eerily still. The absence itself became a red flag. Investigators quickly pieced together the last known movements of those in the home, and all signs pointed in one direction: Alexander Hung Tran. And then a break. Officers discovered Tran hiding inside the house, concealed inside the basement he had lived in. Not fleeing across state lines, not disguising himself, but hiding within the very walls of the building. This detail would later become a chilling symbol of the duality he lived with: the outward gentleness he projected and the violent storm underneath. As police took him into custody, the weight of the tragedy pressed down on everyone involved. And soon, investigators began to pull apart the threads that led to this moment. The deeper they looked, the clearer the picture became. This was not random. It was not sudden. It was the culmination of an obsession that had been growing for weeks. Investigators uncovered messages, constant, emotional, pleading. Messages from Tran to the daughter, AP, expressing admiration, affection, desire. Messages that prosecutors later described as intense and relentless. He told her she was beautiful. He said he loved her. He proposed marriage. And according to people close to AP, she said yes not out of love, but out of fear of losing the home. Because the home wasn't hers. It wasn't even Tran's. It belonged to his mother. And Tran's mother had made her position painfully clear. She wanted the family out. Financial strain, rising costs, and her disapproval of her son's fixation on the tenant's daughter all created a storm of tension behind closed doors. That pressure, investigators believe, was the spark, the moment when Tran's obsession collided with the threat of losing control. According to statements revealed during trial, Tran had become increasingly agitated in the days leading up to the killings. His mother's decision to evict the tenants had triggered anger he struggled to contain. He felt the family slipping away, and with them the woman he had convinced himself was meant to be his partner. It was a dangerous combination, a growing fixation, a sense of entitlement, and the looming fear of rejection. Investigators would later say that the killings were not spontaneous. They were an act driven by resentment, rejection, and emotional collapse. A family had been destroyed because their presence, once welcomed, no longer aligned with the landlord's desires. As the investigation unfolded, the emotional fallout spread far beyond the walls of the home. Neighbors who had seen Tran as quiet and polite were stunned. Some told reporters they had never imagined he could commit such violence. Others recalled a man who seemed isolated, withdrawn, possibly lonely. But loneliness does not explain taking 3 innocent lives. For AP, the daughter who had been the object of his obsession, the devastation was unfathomable. In the span of hours she lost her mother, her newborn child, and a close friend. She had trusted the home as a refuge during a difficult chapter of her life, only to discover it had been a cage she never saw forming. The emotional weight she carried became a central point in courtroom proceedings, where prosecutors emphasized the immense trauma she suffered. Investigators continued to gather evidence. The communication between Tran and AP, reports of the mounting tension in the household, the landlord's behavior in the days before the tragedy, and the way he hid inside the home afterward. The trial revealed even deeper layers of conflict. Between Tran and his mother, between Tran and his own desires, between his outward kindness and his growing resentment. Prosecutors painted a clear picture. A man whose fixation turned into a belief that he was owed affection, cooperation, even loyalty. When that illusion was threatened, he struck out in the most destructive way possible. As the courtroom heard testimony and saw evidence, the emotional fallout reached everyone connected to this family. People who loved them struggled to understand how so many warning signs had gone unnoticed. How kindness had turned into control. How a home had become the setting of a tragedy. The investigations revealed motives and the conflicts laid bare the truth. This was not a crime of passion. It was a crime of possession. A belief that if someone could not belong to him, they could not exist without him. The courtroom was silent on the day the trial reached its most defining moment. Rows of seats filled with family, investigators, community members, and even strangers, all gathered to witness the final chapter of a tragedy that began in a quiet Salt Lake City home. But the silence wasn't empty. It was heavy, alive with grief, tension, and a longing for closure. At the center sat Alexander Hung Tran, the man whose obsession had spiraled into one of the most devastating crimes the community had ever seen. He remained composed, almost detached as prosecutors laid out the final pieces of the story, a story meticulously reconstructed through texts, witness interviews, psychological evaluations, and the chilling scene officers discovered on September 18, 2015. The prosecution did not need theatrics. They needed only the truth. They spoke of Heike Poike, the grandmother who offered everything she had to protect her family. They remembered baby Lyrik, whose life had barely begun. And they honored Dakota Smith, the loyal friend who stepped in to help a struggling family. The jury listened as the state described how Tran's obsession, frustration, and emotional unraveling culminated in the loss of 3 innocent lives. They heard how Tran hid afterward, concealed in the basement, while first responders searched the home above him. They heard of his growing fixation on AP, the tenant's daughter, and how his mother's decision to evict the family may have triggered the final act of violence. Then came the emotional testimony, the kind that pulls at the fabric of anyone with a heartbeat. Family members spoke of the void left behind. Friends described how the tragedy fractured the community. And AP, through statements and recollections shared by prosecutors, revealed the lingering wounds she still carried, wounds that would never fully heal. It became clear this case wasn't just about evidence. It was about lives shattered beyond repair. When the defense rose to speak, they had little room to alter the course of the narrative. The weight of the evidence, the clarity of the investigators' work, and the horrifying reality of the day itself left little space for doubt. Whatever explanation they offered could not outweigh the devastation. And so came the climax, the sentencing. On November 7, 2025, after years of delays, hearings, and emotional turmoil, the gavel came down with finality. 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. The courtroom didn't erupt. It didn't cheer. Justice in cases like this rarely brings celebration. Instead, heads bowed. Tears fell. Some embraced. Others simply breathed out, a long, trembling exhale that had been held in for nearly a decade. For the families of the victims, it wasn't victory. It was a small moment of peace in a storm that had reshaped their entire lives. In the weeks following the sentencing, the community began to reflect on the lessons left behind. Neighbors spoke to reporters, many still in disbelief. Some confessed they never truly knew Tran. Others said they had sensed something was off but never imagined it could escalate to something so catastrophic. Advocates used the tragedy to raise awareness about the dangers of coercive control, a pattern of obsession, pressure, and manipulation that often hides behind quiet gestures and soft-spoken words. The case became a reminder that warning signs aren't always loud. Sometimes they whisper. And if we don't listen, the consequences can be unimaginable. For AP, the emotional journey continued. Losing her mother, her newborn, and her closest friend in one single day created a wound deeper than anyone could articulate. And though justice had been served, she faced a new reality, learning to rebuild a life that had been torn apart. Heike's relatives abroad mourned from a distance, sharing memories of her kindness, her strength, her dedication to family. Dakota Smith's loved ones remembered a friend who always showed up. Baby Lyrik's memory became a symbol of innocence, a tiny life that should have grown into childhood, laughter, and dreams. And that is the difficult truth about tragedies like this. Judges can close cases. Prosecutors can present facts. Courts can deliver justice. But no sentence can undo the pain. No judgment can restore what was lost. Yet, despite the weight of grief, there was a quiet strength in how the families moved forward, step by step, day by day, finding ways to honor the victims, to protect each other, and to share their experiences so others might learn from them. As we close this story, we must remember that behind every headline is a life. Behind every case is a family. And behind every tragedy is a series of small moments, choices, warnings, tensions, that, if noticed earlier, might change everything. Heike Poike, Lyrik Poike, Dakota Smith. 3 names. 3 lives. 3 stories that deserved so much more time on this earth. Their memories deserve more than a retelling. They deserve awareness, compassion, and change. Because this isn't just a crime story. It's a reminder that obsession can disguise itself as kindness. That control can masquerade as protection. And that every one of us must pay attention to the quiet signs that something is not right. If you found this story important, if it moved you or opened your eyes, please take a moment to small blue diamond like this video. It helps the message reach more people. Small blue diamond, share it so this family story is never forgotten. Small blue diamond, subscribe to the channel for more real, respectful, deeply researched stories like this one. Your support allows these stories to be told with dignity, truth, and heart. And together we can shine a light on the hidden dangers that too many people face in silence. Thank you for watching Abby Crime Stories channel, and may the memories of Heike, Lyrik, and Dakota continue to guide us toward greater awareness and empathy.